I'm Kerry Rowett, and this is the Align and Attract podcast, helping you to create your version of an aligned business. Let's dive into today's episode. Today on the podcast, we return to a series that I started last year, Your Aligned Business, where I interview people about the choices and decisions that they have made to create a business that is really beautifully aligned for them. And I haven't had a chance to do any of these interviews until this point because I have been so busy with clients in my work days this year. So this is a real treat. And I do have another interview to share with you really soon. So today I'm speaking with Donna Hann, and you can find her at donnahann.com, and this is Hann, and she's got a podcast. She's in business. I met Donna at Tina Tower's conference in Uluru, and one thing I really love about Donna's story is that the business that she's in now, which is around mentoring entrepreneurial women as they start up and grow their businesses, that this is actually her third business, and she has sold 2 businesses prior. And I think that makes her very uniquely qualified to do the work that she does with her clients. She's got a really great story to tell, and I know that you're going to love this episode. Please do jump across and share with me at Kerry Rowett on Instagram, or with Donna at Donna _HANN_SIB. I'll put it in the notes for you. Let us know your biggest takeaway. Okay, let's dive in. Hello and welcome, Donna. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me on. I feel quite honoured to be here, Kerry. Thank you.
It's going to be amazing. And I know everyone is going to really enjoy hearing about your business and all the decisions you've made to ensure it's really aligned with you. So would you mind starting out by telling us about your business journey up until this point?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Donna Hann. I live in Queensland. So I live in a sunny little town regionally. So we're about 600 k's north of our nearest capital city, which is Brisbane. I have my boys. I've got 2 boys. They are, one's turning 7 next week, which I just can't believe. He's my baby. And then my other son is almost 10, and we've lived here with my husband for almost 11 years. So the reason I'm starting with this is because I don't necessarily have the support of family on hand, because we live interstate from both sides of our family. They're in different states, so we're all over the shop. But my business journey, I guess, started from, I look at the journey that my parents went through. So they emigrated from the UK when I was 6, and they had nothing. Like, they really started from nothing. So I think subconsciously that was always there for me. And I started my first business at 19 while I was at university. And I had, I've been through some different jobs over the years since then in corporate and, in leading training and leading, training and development and stuff like that. And I just have kept coming back to business ownership. I've started, grown and sold 3 businesses now in various industries. So children's entertainment, online retail, had a dance studio, which saw amazing success. But I think the thing that has led me to my business now is juggling and raising a family is quite difficult whilst you're also running a business. And so now I empower and support business owners to go from feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and on that path to burnout to thriving in that space. And, I do that through private coaching. I have a group coaching program called Ready to Rise. I also have a podcast. I do speaking and presentations at conferences and stuff like that. But it's just something I'm really passionate about, and having that opportunity to grow a business before having kids, and then since then, growing another couple of businesses with kids in tow, the challenges were really different. And I think from being on that brink of burnout and having it impacting my marriage, which we can talk about, I'm open book, thankfully now I've got that business experience to support what decisions I make in being really aligned in what I do, and also how that impacts my lifestyle and my, my personal space. And so, I've got that amazing experience and I'm so grateful for it, because when things get tough, I kind of know how to move through it. And that's where I love helping women in business in particular who are super talented at what they do. They decide to open a business, but once they get through those initial setup steps, they don't know either how to shape their business around their lifestyle and move into that profitable, thriving business space, or they don't have the people around them to support them, because it can be stressful and it can be lonely, and I've certainly experienced that. So yeah, that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, and why I love that I get to do this work and support other women in business to rise, really.
And I think you've got a really unique experience in that you have had those 3 successful businesses prior that you have sold.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are guiding people in creating and growing their businesses, it's just this wealth of experience that you've had. And so you've experienced all those highs and lows and different stages, and then also been able to exit, which is not something that I hear so many women talk about, how to actually exiting a business and being able to sell a business. I don't think that's something that is on a lot of people's radar. And I wouldn't mind asking a quick question around that. With each of those businesses, did you know that you were going to sell them, or that you had an aspiration to sell them? Or how did you get to that point where you realized you had a saleable business?
Yeah, I guess with the first 2, I had no idea that I was going to want to sell them. I just got to the point where I was ready to do something different. With my first one, I'd finished uni. I decided to take a gap year, and I jumped in the construction industry of all things. So hard hat and, steel cap boots. And I went off to the Pilbara. And so I was like, well, I don't need this business anymore. And so, offered it to another student at uni. They were happy to take it on. And that was that. And then the second one was in between my children. So I'd had a baby. I was running my business with that baby. I always thought, if I backtrack before the first bub, I always thought I'd be really content just to be a mum and stay at home and do that. But I quickly discovered that it was not enough for me. In fact, like my slogan line is for mums made for more, because I realized at that point that I was made for more. Like, I love being a mum, but, and that's what led me on to start the second business. But at when I fell pregnant with my second baby, I was like, I'm going to give this stay-at-home mum gig another shot, because surely it's harder when you've got 2, and maybe I won't, feel the itch to have this other purpose. So yeah, at that point, that was what was the sale of that business at that point. So, but then with the third business, with the dance studio, from the get-go, I was like, okay, at some point I may want to exit this business. And so, like, I didn't have a specific kind of date in mind. I kind of knew that once the kids got to high school, I wanted to be available to them at home after school hours, because the dance studio is like lots of after school hours, as well as during the day, you're doing all the admin work. And so, yeah, the goal, I guess, was to, once they were at high school, be available, because I've got boys, right? So they don't necessarily communicate so openly, and you just need to be there in those moments where they feel like talking and telling you what's going on in their life. And so I wanted to be there for that. So yeah, I had more intention with the dance studio of setting it up so that it had value in it, that I had something to sell. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Super interesting to hear about that process that you went through. And then also with your boys, because I think a lot of people, like, especially when you're thinking about having a baby, or you have a baby, or you have very young children, you think, well, I'm in the trenches now, and then I'm going to have more space and freedom. But I've heard so many people, and there'll be people who are listening who are like, yes, that's me, who realized that heading towards teenage years, and I know you're a bit younger than that still, but they realize, my teens actually still need a lot of my time and attention. So it's interesting that it wasn't so much even through the primary years you felt like, I need to be really, really available at those times.
Yeah.
You knew it was coming later.
Yeah.
That was going to be really necessary.
Yeah, that's right. Because like I said, I think, when they get to those teen years, you just need to be around, right? Like
that presence.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't want to be like teaching dance classes in the afternoons and them getting home off the bus to an empty house and not feeling that they had that support. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So that was really important to me. But as it turns out, I sold the business much earlier than I thought would have happened. But it's been wonderful. So
Yes, amazing. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about some of those decisions that you did make to make this business more aligned to you and to creating that work life family blend?
yeah, I love this question because I was actually super intentional about how I shaped this business, which the previous businesses, I don't think I had that foresight as much or that kind of awareness that I needed to be really intentional with it from the get-go. So I remember sitting down with pen and paper and really mapping out all the things that I already had in my life that I wanted to keep. So of course, like husband and kids, like that is of course staple. And then I also like wanted to make sure I had elements that I wanted to keep, like we like to travel a lot in the caravan. The kids just love it. And it's a beautiful way for our family to really connect. So that had to be there. We love socializing. So I needed to make sure there was space for that in life and also like having time for me. I've learnt the hard way that if you don't look after yourself, you know, there is burnout. And I wanted to earn some great money. The other thing that I was really intentional when I sat down with my pen and paper was what I wanted to let go of. So I didn't want to manage a big team. I didn't want kind of rigid structure, as in like with the dance studio, it was all based around the school term. And so then life had to work around the school term. So that flexibility was important. And then there was different elements that I didn't have, but I wanted to have. So I wanted more connection with inspiring people regularly. I wanted to be helping other people on a larger scale and have that kind of like ripple effect where if I help them, then they can help others and they can help others. And so that was really important to me. And so then after I kind of mapped out what that sort of looked like, I then thought about the skill sets and the experience that I had acquired over the years. And I looked at my strengths. And then from that, I was like, okay, how do I apply all of this to creating an aligned business that's going to suit me and my lifestyle? And so I wanted to make sure it was also something that filled me up and ignited my passion that I, you know, knew would keep me occupied and keep me inspired to keep moving through. And it also needed to honor my strong sense of purpose because, you know, I am ambitious. I do like to, you know, I'm results orientated. And, you know, I wanted to keep earning that good money. So it also needed to be viable. And so, you know, I looked at, well, what do people want? Is there space for this? How can I really incorporate business education and business coaching and a community? You know, is there a market for that? Do people actually want this thing? And then like sort of through that process, I developed my niche and looked at, you know, my ideal client and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a real process. It wasn't just that I'm going to open a business because it's going to be fun and it's going to give me all this stuff, which I think some people jump into and go, oh, I'm good at this, so I'll just, instead of working for somebody else doing it, I'll do it for myself, but they don't actually map all of that out. But I think the reason that I did is because I know the danger of the other side when you're super passionate and ambitious and driven and, you know, you just want to keep doing more and more and more and more. And before you know it, you know, and that was a massive lesson for me with the dance studio. Bigger isn't always better. More isn't always better. It's important to really honor what's important to you first and what's important to your family and then business. You know, and so that's, I guess, the way that I created the business that I have today. It was super intentional.
Yeah, I love hearing about that because it wasn't an accidental process. It wasn't just, let's just see what happens. You actually really went through that whole planning process, which I think is really powerful. And then to be able to, you know, create that and bring that into form. And I know you've kind of alluded to this, but I wonder if you'd mind going into a bit more detail about the values that are really important to you, because I'm hearing that, your values and having an alignment with your values are a big part of what has been so important for you in this business. So can
Yeah.
you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about like company values, I did a stint in corporate and they always like were up. They did use them, credit to them. They weren't just stuffed in a drawer, like they were laced through different things throughout the business. Um, and so I could appreciate at that point that values were really important to keep people on the same page and, performance expectations and all of that kind of stuff. But there was a real stuffiness to them and like a real stiffness to them that was just really difficult to connect to. But then I discovered Brene Brown, love her, right? And I did this 2-day workshop and it was called Daring Greatly. And it's based on Brene Brown's work and it's a program from her Daring Greatly education program. And it has to be like facilitated by certified people in her work and all of that kind of stuff. But doing that 2-day workshop, I already had an amazing appreciation for that lady. Like she is just incredible. But after doing the workshop, I had such a deeper understanding for values and how to, I guess, uncover them and then refine them. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so was it through that process that you deepened the values that you already had?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think I had so many like aha moments going through that then invited me to kind of sit down and uncover what mine really were. And like she has this quote, which is, it's a value is a way of being or believing that we hold most important. And I think when we refine our values, it's about looking at like, well, what are the values that light the way for me when things get tough and which ones get me through? And so, yeah, I guess in discovering more about me and my own values, I'm always asking myself, like, when I'm aligned to this value, am I at my best? Like usually when you're at your best, you're really aligned to a value that sits strong with you. Or, the great thing about having values is because when you have to make those hard decisions, those tough decisions, values and knowing your values really help make those decisions so much easier,
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I think values are so important as a business owner, but also as just a person in general. It can be, when you're in those situations where someone has crossed a line for you and crossed a value set, and you get that kind of real visceral reaction where you feel heat in your body and there's anger and there's kind of frustration or, any of those emotions, it's a real strong indication that that's a strong value set for you. And I think if you've just got that self-awareness of that, then in those moments where you feel like your value has been violated or crossed or whatever, you can actually respond rather than react in those moments as well. So even if it's not related to business and you're just looking at this from a personal perspective, values are just so important to know and to appreciate and to really understand for yourself.
And is there some advice you could give to someone who's listening in and they think, I've thought about values before, but I haven't gone as deep as what you're talking about. And maybe now that I'm listening, I feel like I would like to go a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Is there some advice or a suggestion that you could offer as to how they could do that?
Yeah, I guess like what I was saying before is identifying it can sometimes be the hardest thing. There's a really great list that's actually available on online. If you just Google Brene Brown and list of values, it will come up. And that can be a great starting point, is just to kind of like circle 6 or 8 of them that kind of jump out to you. And then to really refine whether they are actually your core values is to either, like what I was saying before, ask yourself, when I'm at my best, is this the value set that I'm living? Or, when I'm making a hard decision, are these the kind of thoughts that come up for me in validating whether that decision is right or wrong? Is it linked to that value set? Or when in the past you've had an experience where you've had those moments where it's made you really angry or really frustrated, or it's just really crossed the line for you, that's an indication that that's a value for you.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I guess to keep coming back to them and be super honest with yourself, and asking yourself the question, like, is this in alignment with my core values? And if it's not, well, then we may need to look at changing what you're doing or putting in some extra boundaries in place to keep that or to realign.
It's so true, isn't it? I've seen that with clients. Sometimes there can be a value that we might feel like this is true for us or this is important to us. But then when we look at the evidence, we're not living in alignment with that. So it's either the case that that value isn't as important to us as what we say it is. Maybe we think we should have that value, or we're actually needing to take some action to align more deeply with that value and to create that congruence.
100%. And I think sometimes you can take action immediately and you can just change what you're doing. But if it's an offer that you've had in your business for a long time, it can be something that can take a longer time to actually change, but just having a change management strategy in place can instantly kind of elevate that alignment anyway and go, okay, but I'm working towards it and that's okay. And it could be, I don't know, maybe you've realized that working Saturdays just doesn't align anymore because it crosses values in other ways that you can't be in the moment with your family, or you're, saying no to soccer games and things like that because you're working instead. And it might not be something that you can instantly go, well, Saturday's no longer available, sorry. But it may be something that you can change over time and, move your clients into different spots and then eventually, close off on those Saturdays. But it's just really important, I think, because if you're continually working against those values, even if it's subconscious, even if you're like, I just feel out of whack, and then you identify that it's because you're working against a value set, eventually, if you keep working against it, it's going to eat you up and burn you out because it's just exhausting to be up against that all the time. Hey.
And you're not going to feel good about yourself. You're not going to feel good about your life necessarily when you're working against those values.
Yeah, exactly.
So along that, like, we all have challenges to our alignment in different ways. And so I was wondering, has there been a time that you can think of that you'd be willing to share where you noticed a challenge? It could be to your values, or it could have been just in general, like if something wasn't feeling aligned, and how you worked through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many. Being in business is challenging, right, Kerry? Like, it's so challenging. But probably, I think if I am like really open and honest in this space, which I'm so happy to do that with you, is probably separating from my husband for a while was probably the most challenging experience of my entire life. And we did work through it. Things are now like wonderful. But for a while they really were not. And, this happened a few years back, and there were lots of contributing factors, right? But essentially what happened is we had become ships in the night. We were disconnected, and we both realized that it wasn't what we wanted anymore. So it was a really interesting, challenging time. But in that time, I asked myself some pretty bold and very scary questions. And I was super honest with myself. I thought, you know what, I'm already a mess. So why not just like really open things up and figure out where the misalignment was? Because internally, I felt like I was misaligned everywhere. Like it really did feel like I was misaligned at home. I was misaligned in my business. I was misaligned with me. Like it just felt like I was just everywhere and nowhere in that way. And so at the time I had my dance studio, and I had created this booming business that I'd spent the previous few years really systemizing it and making it so that I wasn't the linchpin of the business. Like it wasn't dependent upon me to run. So my team were amazing. And it was great, right? So it was this real weird situation where my business was running super well. It was running without me. It was giving me a great income, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I wasn't aligned to it anymore. And it was a real strange thing because people would say to me, like my inner circle that I would talk to and say, oh, it's just feeling like, they'd say, but why don't you just stick with it? Like, you're getting money and you're not really doing much for it. Like, you've put all this work in. Why would you walk away now? But I just knew in my heart that it wasn't where I wanted to be anymore. I wasn't aligned with it. But interestingly, there was this strange feeling as well of letting it go. And I think a lot of it was wrapped around, even though I was planning on selling it, there was still an element that I was like, well, is this failure though somehow? That, like, what will people think? I'm letting people down. Like, I had a really close team, and essentially I was letting them go in a way, and letting the long-term students that we had go. And, it was really tricky. And also, like, letting the income go, like, that was pretty scary. And so, and this was all happening whilst I was having these big conversations, was while we were separated. So, letting the income go was super scary, because that, was what I needed to have to be independent from my husband. Like, it was just, it was a horrible time.
Wow.
Yeah. But eventually, I made the decision. I was like, yeah, when the time is right, I'm going to let this go, because I know that it's not for me anymore. And eventually that time came, which was great. It presented itself, and I took a chance, and I had a conversation with a staff member and just said, would you like the opportunity to buy this from me? I'm ready to move on. And she took the chance with me, and it's amazing, and, although I could have kept running the dance studio, it was well managed without me. I could have kept it going for the income alone, but I knew in my heart that I checked out and I didn't want to do it anymore. And so, selling it was the best decision that I made at that point.
Yeah. Wow. What a process that was. And not choosing like the easiest or even necessarily like safest feeling option, doing that really deep work to check in with yourself. And
there was lots of journaling.
And going with what was really felt right long term. And I think sometimes we can think, well, this pathway is logical, or this is looking a certain way, or it should work. I should be able to stay with this. But then if you've got that misaligned feeling and it's just not, your heart's not in it, I sometimes wonder, how long is it going to stay like that? As well. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you could have decided, I'll just keep going for those reasons, but maybe for whatever reason you would have had to step back into it, or you would have had to show up more, and you were like, that's not what I had in mind. I like being hands off.
It's so funny that you say that, because as we were talking there, I was like, and that was the other reason, is because even though, yes, it was running really well without me, if something went wrong and I got dragged back in, I'd be like, I don't want to do this, and it would have shown through. And it also, I would have been resentful for it. And, that then leaks out in other areas of your life. And so, it was just you
kind of saw the opportunity as well. Whilst it's running well, that is the time to sell, not wait until now I really do need to get rid of it. And it's like, oh, well, it's not a saleable business. So
exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
So I think we can feel like, oh my gosh, you took this enormous risk, but also it was probably like the smartest choice as well. With your time and energy, you know what I mean? So is there an aspect of your business that does feel incredibly aligned, that you are really proud of, that you would like to share with us?
I'm pretty proud of all of it, to be honest. I love what I do, and I'm so grateful that I get to do what I do, and also that the women that I work with trust me to work with them and have, invited me in as part of their business journey. Like, that's just amazing. But I think connection. So connection is one of my highest personal values. And inside the Ready to Rise community, and, I also host in my local area monthly get-togethers to bring business women together, even in private coaching, that one-on-one connection. That's, I think, what I'm most proud of, because that's that sense of belonging, that space to ask all the questions, to feel supported. Like, for me, that was probably the part of business that until I found my tribe, in the amazing business groups that I've been a part of over the years. But that was always tricky. You felt quite alone in business sometimes. And as much as you might have a supportive partner at home, an amazing circle of friends, all of that kind of stuff, they don't always get it. And so creating that space for connection is what really fills my heart, and I think is what is really special about what I do in my business, and certainly the thing that I'm most proud of.
Amazing. Would you mind finishing up by letting us know how we can find you, how people can work with you, all of
Yeah,
those?
sure. So my website is donnahann.com, and it's 2 N's in both names. So I didn't realize I have 4 N's in my name. Like, how crazy is that? So donnahann.com, and also Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram, which is Donna_Hann_SIB, which stands for She's in Business. And I have a podcast too, which you've been on my podcast.
I
Sherry.
have. So if you haven't already listened, please do go and listen to Donna's podcast. It is really great, and listen to our episode as well. But yeah, Donna does a lot of really wonderful interviews there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's lots of fun. It's lots of fun. And I love that, the other thing that I love to try and do is having that alignment with people. Like, obviously they align to me for what I put out there, but also having different levels that people can find me through. I think that's really important, because although we may be aligned with what I'm doing and what they're doing, and that, I can help them on that business journey and all of that kind of stuff, they may be at different levels of their business. So the podcast is great because it's free, and it introduces different people into your world, like when you came and were a guest on the podcast. And then there's private coaching, which is obviously like the top tier level, where you're ready to really accelerate your business and dive really deep. And then there's the group coaching, which is more where it's you still have a business coach at your fingertips, so it's much more affordable because it's in that group coaching sort of arena. And there's the community that happens there, and then there's presenting, where you just get like a bite-sized moment of time to be exposed to what else is possible within business. So I like to also make sure that we're aligned, not just in what we do and how we do it and why we do it, but also at the stage that you need different things.
Yeah, that's so perfect. And it helps people to like build on that alignment as well, as you're saying, because if you feel connected with someone, it's like there is that question, like, well, what's the next step? What's the next step? Because you don't necessarily, and this is like interesting for people to think about, I'm sure you already have, but it's like you don't necessarily come across someone and then the next step is, oh, now I'm going to sign up to work with them tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, it is nice to have those stages and steps, isn't it? So people can become closer to you, get more of an idea about what it is that you offer. Do you have a specific freebie that you would like to recommend?
Yes, well, I've got a few. I guess maybe, like we've talked about alignment, so maybe like attracting your ideal client could be something that's really, so if you go to donnahann.com/ICA, you can find that one there, and it's a free download that just helps you to identify who your ideal client is and almost like create them, so that when you're doing your marketing messaging, when you are, creating something, when you're considering creating a new offer perhaps within your business, whether it be product-based or service-based, that kind of helps you to make sure that you're aligning to your client's needs and that it's going to be successful.
I love how aligned we are, because I have got something completely different but on the same topic as well. Cool. And I love how like we all come to things from such different angles as well. So thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. I've absolutely loved it. Please come across to either my profile on Instagram at Kerry Rowett, or to Donna at Donna_Hann_SIB, and tell us something that you've taken away from this episode and let us know what you thought. And I cannot wait to hear all of your insights. Thank you so much for your time, Donna.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you loved this episode with Donna Hann of She's in Business. I have actually been on Donna's podcast as well. So that was She's in Business. So you might like to jump across and do a little search for that one. Donna's podcast is great. If you listen to our episode, I would love to hear your thoughts. This was episode 72 of the Align and Attract podcast, and that means you can find all of the relevant show notes over at alignandattract.com/blog/72. too. Thank you so much for being here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share, please subscribe, please consider doing a little review, and I will see you next time.